Hello, I'm Andrew, and this evening I'm very excited to be joined by Jessica Grene. So we're going to be talking as part of our series of conversations about writing and people's thoughts around kind of their own work in writing and publishing. So yeah, it should be an interesting conversation. So yeah, Jessie, would you like to introduce yourself? Or?
Sure. Hi. So, um, Jessica Grene. I'm a writer of fiction. I've had a couple of short stories published, and I've been working for a very long time on a novel, which is in its sort of still in its first draft. And I've started kind of conceiving the second novel recently.
So would you like to tell us about the novel that you've been working on mostly?
Yeah, well, it's like it has been a long time. It's been off and on and through other projects, but it started in 2017, and it was originally, a friend of mine was talking about um a, talking about a client. He'd had an older woman who he'd been seeing professionally, who it was this story that I started writing into a short story, and then the characters kind of stayed with me, and I went on writing it, and it kind of kept springing around, and I realized this is the novel that I've been thinking about writing, and went on, and I went through various phases of saying I'm not writing this anymore, and kind of still plugging away at it. And then, so to the end of last year of 2021, I decided, okay, I really have to finish at least the first draft. So I entered the manuscript for two novel competitions, and so that gave me a sort of an external deadline, because you submit an excerpt of 5,000 or 10,000 words, on the understanding that you have a manuscript of at least 50,000 words ready to be sent should you be shortlisted. Now, I didn't place in either of those competitions, but it gave me the impetus to really go ahead and keep writing. And that actually was, that those months were really, really fun, of just trying to get to, a certain point. And then after that, I sort of didn't want to look at that novel for a while, and I put it into a drawer. And just recently, I've been thinking about, oh yeah, I want to go back and sort this out. But it is an unholy mess of a manuscript. Like, it's going to need so much editing, because I found that, I didn't have a lot of time for writing. So writing would be done, in dribs and drabs, wherever you can find the time. So I'd find when I was going through the manuscript, there were pieces that I'd written twice, like not realizing that I've already written this scene, and I'd given people different, the same characters had different names at different times. So it really is quite unwieldy, and it's 55,000 words, which would be quite short for a novel, and it's not a short story, because it has a lot of different characters and generations and things going on. So that's where it is now. Yeah, but
Okay, so I
taking
suppose
the courage to go back to it. Yeah.
so I suppose with the editing process, it can be I suppose it can be difficult to do to hold excuse me everything in mind if you're
Mm.
only doing it kind of bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, yeah.
And you mentioned there were kind of certain points you kind of wanted to kind of leave it aside, or were there particular moments that were there particular things about the book that you felt that you had to leave it aside for a while, or that you were losing confidence, and then you kind of found you regained confidence a bit by submitting it to competitions, or
Yeah, well, I certainly I would feel that, like, oh, I've been saying I'm writing this for so long, and then there would be, weeks would go by when I hadn't written anything, and I would think, well, this is just, you know, why am I doing this? This is a millstone around my neck at this point. But so yeah, that did the submitting it to competitions. Also, just sometimes something would occur, some story, some thought, and I think that's going in the novel, and then that kind of gets you excited again. I'd love to have the discipline where I just wrote for a set amount every single day, but I don't have the lifestyle or the discipline to do that.
I mean, I suppose writing a novel is kind of a marathon, like, so it's rather than a sprint, if that's not too
Mm.
much of a cliche. So I suppose you're, yeah, it's kind of something, yeah. I know some people do write every day, but it's yeah, not always realistic for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, if people do keep plugging away and eventually, yeah, finish them. So, and then you're saying you're kind of working on a second draft. Are the particular things that you want to kind of change about the book, or?
Well, I mean, it it needs a lot of work sorting out, making it consistent. Even just the fact that the original story I started writing in 2017, I'm a different writer than I was then. So some things that I go back around, I think, oh no, no, um, and sometimes I think, wow, this is amazing. And sometimes it's the same piece. Um, but yeah, it needs a lot more consistency. It needs to be more, thought out. It was, cobbled in various ways, which I really like that. But, it needs to be looked at overall. I mean, because it's a book. It's slightly similar in type to the early books that the early novels of Kate Atkinson. So
Okay.
behind the scenes at the museum was Kate Atkinson's first book, and it's got it's a family, but it's got all these different things going on, and quite often the connections are not known to the characters. So that's kind of book I'm trying to write. And that means a lot of, stepping outside it and going, okay, what am I trying to say here? How did these actually connect, even though these connections are unknown to the characters themselves?
Okay. Yeah, so it's quite I suppose it can be quite complex in terms of the characters and their interrelationships. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be tricky to edit then if you're yeah,
It is, yeah.
if you're kind of leaving it aside for a week or something and then you're coming back and yeah.
Yeah.
And you were saying you've got kind of an idea or a plan for a second novel, is that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And I swore after when finishing the first draft of my first novel that I was going to write a novel that had a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that it had one protagonist. And this was the kind of thing I was going to write. And then I got, an idea that I was thinking maybe this could work for the second novel, maybe, and it just grew. I don't think, I don't think that a single protagonist novel is the kind of thing I write. I wish it was. It seems like it would be simpler, and I wish, you know, that I could think of things that had, a plot that began and had a middle and an end, but
Hmm.
it doesn't seem like I do.
What can you tell us a bit about your idea for the second novel?
Yes, it's very much still at idea stage, so which is kind of nice because it's incredibly broad. So because I
So much for
work,
your one protagonist, I suppose.
yeah, well, it's lots and lots of ideas. So I work on professionally on a project to do with the ethics of data privacy, and so
Okay.
that kind of gave me some ideas about what like
So the second novel is a work of fiction, right?
mhm.
Yeah, okay, we'll say that for legal reasons anyway.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely is. Oh yeah, and it no no, it just that like hearing factual nonfiction things about the ethics of data privacy
Yeah.
made me think about sort of fictional scenarios
Yes, yeah.
about, about the ethics of data privacy, about, what would someone do? What would an artist, a writer do? Specifically, I want to put a writer, a video game writer, in a situation where they're being asked to do things that maybe don't correspond with what they think of as ethical, and then the people around them. And so the very broad things that it's encompassing is, sort of looking at the difference in oral and written traditions, and uh, the way that things being captured affects reality, if you can follow me. So quite a big one. Yeah, yeah. And yeah, just kind of about that. Again, it just seems it starts from that and then goes off into all these different relationships and so on. But yeah, the premise is basically it's about a video game writer who is asked to do potentially unethical work for a very big company.
Okay. Yeah, it's quite an interesting theme. Yeah. Like the last book I finished was kind of maybe very broadly kind of a similar area about kind of near future kind of speculative fiction about sort of a virtual reality video game tester, but it was, I suppose, it was looking at kind of mental health stigma and psychological horror and the relationship between the two, I suppose, but through a lens of kind of virtual reality or speculative fiction. But I suppose I didn't get too much into GDPR or anything with it. But yeah, and just in terms of entering, you mentioned in terms of entering the you're writing into a contest. Was there a particular? Did you feel that gave you a bit of a confidence boost, or were there particular ways in which that did that, or did you have some
Yeah.
kind of nervousness
Well,
around that at the same time?
it gave me the external spur and a way of looking at it and going over. I think it is a good thing to do as well, because I certainly the novel, I would not feel that it's ready for me to be querying agents at all yet. And it may well not have been ready to be entered into these competitions. But yeah, looking at your work, and then submitting it. One of the things I found incredibly difficult was writing a synopsis of the novel. And I can talk for a really long time about this novel, but I cannot write 500 words of a synopsis. It's a strangely difficult thing to do. But yeah, I thought it was a good experience. Yeah.
I think a lot of writers find that, and it is one of the maybe perils of sending your work elsewhere is that I suppose even our discussion now, like I suppose we were speaking a fair bit about kind of broader thematic elements of your work, but it can be tricky to kind of boil down, say, what happens in the book, like to 500 words. I mean, even if someone's writing fairly kind of plot driven kind of stuff, it can be quite tricky to kind of to slice back or just decide what to kind of put into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it is, I mean, yeah, if I suppose it is a long form version of expression. So, you can't really capture what someone gets out of the novel, just in that kind of short form. And do you find that, have you, I know you were saying you felt it wasn't ready for submission to agents. Have you ever submitted other work to agents, or
No,
submitted other work for publication?
other work, yeah. So I've had a couple of stories published, and I do send out short stories and flash fiction to literary journals, and sometimes to competitions. And I do find that it's hard to keep working on those, working on short stories, flash fiction, at the same time as working on a novel. But I like to do that. It's kind of keeps it interesting, and that is something I definitely feel it sort of, like, sometimes they're themed competitions, stuff like that. I actually find those sometimes when there is a specific theme or a specific, um first line, last line, those kind of things. I sometimes find those quite fun, even if I don't end up submitting to that particular competition, because
Mm.
that often happens because deadlines. Um, but it's still interesting to have a go at that kind of thing.
And so, if you had some short fiction published, like how did you find the experience of having it sort of out there, kind of in the world?
Um, I was really happy about it. I was, I really liked having my name out there, having um stories out there. You know, um, it was, yeah, no, that I got a real kick out of that.
Great, great. And do you ever go back and read it again, like looking at it where it was published, or?
Oh God, no,
Oh, yeah,
no.
I know. Yeah, I know, because I know a lot of writers don't like to revisit work once it's published. But just when you mentioned that you were happy to see it out, like, yeah, because I suppose it
No,
often
I
might see.
I I enjoyed I enjoyed, like, I gave a reading for the launch of the edition of Cranog that published one of my stories, and I really enjoyed that. But no, I don't want to go look at my own published work. I was happy that it was out there, and then people read it and they said nice things to me about it. But no, because I can't. I'm never done editing. Like, I saw a poll recently by Mislexia magazine saying, do you edit up to the last minute? And 90% of people said yes. And I don't know who the 10% of psychos are who, like, have finished their work before submitting it, but I'm not one of them. Um, and so it's happened, that I've submitted things, they've been rejected, and I change them, send them out again. But I don't think that having something accepted, if I looked at it again, I think I would still want to change things.
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to what you're saying. Particularly, I suppose it might be one thing with the short story, but particularly for novels, if you're spending a year or two writing it, then but the time you finish the first draft, like you say yourself, you're kind of a different writer. You
Mm.
might have a different view on the work itself, having finished it compared to when you were kind of halfway through. So yeah, it certainly makes sense. You can kind of keep editing and editing, kind of
Yeah.
ad nauseum.
Yeah.
And I suppose it can be easy to be if you have kind of feedback as well. I mean, I've had kind of feedback on a novel from publisher. Like it can be easy to be defensive about your work. I feel that it's you might want to edit it yourself, but I suppose, yeah, looking at some of the feedback, myself, I felt that, although it might not be the same book, it might still be as good a book, or could explore what I was looking at in the in an interesting way. So yeah, I suppose that's editing. I suppose editing yourself is one thing, and then kind of editorial feedback from others is another. Yeah. Cool. So, was there anything else you wanted to kind of add about your own experience, kind of writing or publishing, or kind of thoughts you had about kind of the process of seeing your work out there or submitting it, or?
Um, no, I don't think so. Well, I have it's something that I've noted recently, just if when you see really well established writers talking about, their next book coming out or something like that, I kind of think before you're, well, I, you know, tend to think sometimes, before you're a published author, oh well, then you've made it. And once you have a book, several books, acclaim out there, then you must stop having this anxiety. So, not sure how I feel about these established writers who clearly still do have this anxiety.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I suppose once you've achieved one milestone, I mean, people can kind of rest in their laurels, or can feel good about it. But I mean, people will probably then have something else they want to do in the future. So if you get nominated for a Booker, well, maybe next year you want to win it, or et cetera, et cetera. Or if you sell X, you make X amount of money, you might want to make more or whatever. So um, yeah, it's I guess that's probably true of any kind of enterprise. So yeah,
Indeed, yeah.
cool. Well, thanks very much for speaking with us this evening. So yeah, so if you're watching, yeah, please do like and subscribe, and hopefully we should have a few more kind of interviews coming up over the coming months. So thanks again, Jesse.
Thank you.